Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well and has had a really good week. It's really good to be back on my YouTube channel. I meant to do this video earlier this week, but it's been really hectic in my personal life between starting a new position, and also I've been kind of fighting some type of cold or sinus issue, and so I've been kind of struggling with that. But I really wanted to come on here because I had a little extra downtime, and I wanted to discuss my thoughts on the most recent documentary about the child sex abuse problem in the Jehovah's Witness organization. It was a documentary that aired on the Oxygen channel, and it was called The Witnesses, and it aired this past weekend. It was like a two-part documentary that aired on Saturday and Sunday of this past week. So if you'd like to hear some of my thoughts and some of the things I got from it, please stay tuned. So if you hadn't had a chance to watch this documentary, it is available on the Oxygen website, as well as I think on the app. So if you have an Android or an iPhone, you can download the Oxygen channel basically on one of those devices. And then if you have a subscription such as a cable TV or what have you, you can actually stream it for free. And I think I've seen some other people who have actually made it available for free on like Facebook and YouTube. So I guess just do a search, search The Witnesses either on Facebook or YouTube, and you might be able to view that documentary in its entirety, so that you're able to check it out, so that you can kind of follow along with what I'm talking about. Also, if you do watch it, it is kind of triggering. So if you can relate to a lot of the issues that are discussed there, just be aware of that. Even if you haven't experienced it, for me, certain parts were very triggering. A lot of the abuse that was discussed is very disturbing. So you might want to watch it with a calm mind, not be kind of distracted with other things. So that you get the full benefit of it, but so that in case it is triggering, you'll be able to kind of find ways to kind of get through those moments. So in this two-part documentary, the experiences of a few young women were shared, where they shared their experiences of being sexually abused within the Jehovah's Witness organization, how it impacted them, and even how not only their elders, but also their parents reacted to what happened to them. And then some of the parents reacted as natural parents would, where they try to seek justice for their children. But for a few of them, it's just surprising how indoctrinated or how indoctrination can impact even your basic feelings and abilities as a parent. So it's just really interesting. I also love the way that they address those women as survivors instead of victims, because it's a very traumatic thing to happen. But when you're able to live through it, seek justice for yourself, you're able to tell other people, and you're continuously trying to heal, and you live through that, and you're brave enough to tell your story to help others. To me, that's very empowering and it's very brave. So I really love how they address those as survivors, because in a sense, they're heroes to other people, whether they're inside or outside the organization currently, where they're able to relate to those issues and perhaps even seek some healing for themselves. It also really showed to me just the danger of putting your implicit trust in anyone just because they have the same belief system as you do. And that's how Jehovah's Witnesses control their members. When they even teach in their own books and their literature that you can trust your brothers, especially if they're baptized, your brothers and sisters, because they always have your best intentions at heart. And I talk about that in a lot of my videos. They strongly encourage that implicit trust. They constantly tell their members that no matter what part of the world that they live in, no matter where they are, if there's another person across the globe that's also a Jehovah's Witness, that they can automatically trust them just because they are a Jehovah's Witness. And to me, that's really dangerous because, as they acknowledge, there are lots of imperfect people out there with very scary pasts. And of course, as we know now, one of those pasts or those habits is abusing young children. And so when you're encouraged to put your implicit trust on anyone in the organization, that's really dangerous, because what happens is a lot of parents put their guard down and they end up, entrusting their children to the most dangerous people within the organization. And in this case, a lot of that happened in some of these stories where they entrusted their children to work alone with these people who were considered, higher people in the congregation, such as elders and people who had really big roles in the organization. And they ended up using their power to take advantage of innocent children. So I found that very interesting. It really reminds me, and I talked about this before in a video, it reminds me of when I was young and I was trying to get baptized, but my hours weren't high enough. So the elders wanted me to work more out in field service. And my parents would tell me, you need to get with the friends. You need to go on your own. If we're not able to go out, you need to call the friends to get you. And to me, that's kind of dangerous, because me as a 10, 11-year-old on my own trying to ask somebody to go out in field service, you don't know what these people do behind the closed doors. So that's really kind of dangerous. But it really shows you just the really implicit trust that me and a lot of people can attest to that you're supposed to put in your brother and sister. Excuse me. Just because they are a baptized Jehovah's Witness. Another thing that really got to me, they, in the documentary, they projected the number of possible people who were guilty of abusing children in the United States. And they based that number on what happened in Australia with the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, with the Australia Royal Commission, where they found over 1,000 pedophiles were out there, and not one of them had been reported to the police. And so they compared the population of Australia and the amount of Jehovah's Witness pedophiles that were there compared to the population of the United States. And they projected like 18,000 possible cases of pedophilia that, for the most part, had not been reported. So that was just really crazy to me. And I think back on another documentary that was done about almost 20 years ago. It was on Dateline, where they had a couple of insiders who knew about this pedophile database, and nobody else knew about it. This was uncovered on this documentary, and they actually projected about 23,000 cases of pedophilia in the Jehovah's Witness organization, where not a lot of them had been reported to the police. So it really just shows the widespread problem that's going on here. And if it was over 20,000 back then, almost 20 years ago, you could imagine the number now. And so that was really crazy to me. So it really just shows you, and that's just child abuse. That's not counting the other types of abuse that's happened in the organization, such as physical abuse, spousal abuse, physical abuse of children, sexual abuse of adults. There's just so many things that happen that are not only just a sin, they're a crime, and they're not being addressed in the Jehovah's Witness organization because of basically the rules and the loopholes that they've chosen to go around to avoid being held accountable to the authorities. And so with all that being said, this to me is bigger than just the abuse that's going on within the organization. When it comes to child sex abuse and pedophilia, to me, it's a national security issue. For me, formerly, as far as being a Jehovah's Witness, there are no background checks that they do when their members are considering, going out in field service and knocking on the public's doors and trying to preach to them. They don't do background checks. All they do is ask you a few questions from their literature about Bible doctrine. If you answer those correctly, you're qualified to go knocking on people's doors. So when you think about that, a lot of the people in that documentary that were accused of child abuse, they were still able to knock on doors. They were active Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, that's the main way, knocking on people's doors and basically preaching to people and promoting Jehovah's Witness doctrine is the main way that you are able to remain an active Jehovah's Witness in good standing. So can you imagine the number of people who are pedophiles out there who are still knocking on people's doors? And I think of, like, just because a lot of the victims are children that are in the Jehovah's Witness religion, pedophiles are pedophiles. You don't know what a sick person's interest might be as they're knocking on those doors and encountering children, for example, whose parents aren't home to protect them. Can you imagine just the safety issues outside of the organization that occur? I haven't heard of any reports of things like that happening, and I'm sure a lot of those people who do such things stick with children within the organization because it's less likely to be reported. But those sick desires are still there, whether there's children in the organization or whether they're not. So to me, it's just a huge national security issue. And I feel that Jehovah's Witnesses have not protected their congregants with this issue. And I think they need to be held accountable for that. There's like this petition going around saying that they need to be investigated by the FBI. And I agree. I think that needs to happen because they have not submitted to the laws. They have not done what they needed to do to follow even the most basic laws to protect their children and anybody else who might be victims of sexual abuse. So I'll go ahead and actually put that petition in the description box if you want to check that out. So I'm seeing a lot of interesting insight, and observations on this documentary, which have been very refreshing. I really like how they were able to expose a lot of the things that the organization was doing to get around a lot of the legal requirements, especially of the states. In a lot of states, there's mandatory reporting laws where if something happens that's against the law, they have to report it to the authorities. And they find every loophole, every which way to avoid that. But I did notice that some people were criticizing people who believe that the organization needs to go down once and for all. And I used to kind of be on the fence with that. But I'm thinking about, especially watching this documentary, thinking about all the shunning that's happening where families are not speaking to each other because one family member decided to leave the religion and didn't believe it anymore. People are losing friends. People are committing suicide because they don't have all their circle of friends, all the people that they once known have abandoned them. And Jehovah's Witnesses are going to continue to get away with doing those things as long as they're being recognized as an organization, as long as they're getting tax-exempt status and everything. They're going to continue to protect the pedophiles. They're going to continue to hide that database. They're going to continue to shun just to continue getting to have that power and control over their members. Excuse me. They're going to continue doing all of those things. So the child sex abuse problem to me is not going to fully go away until the organization does go down. So criticizing people who want the organization to go down is kind of counterproductive because these people need to be held accountable once and for all for a lot of the lives that they've ruined, whether it's through child sex abuse, whether through the other forms of physical abuse, or just the emotional abuse that happens when you encourage your members to shun their own family members and their friends just because they decide to change their belief system. I believe that the Jehovah's Witness leaders, especially the governing body, have made it crystal clear that they're not willing to comply with any laws that will have an impact on their image in the organization or the control that they have for their members. And they're going to continue to not comply with laws and continue to not want their pedophiles exposed as long as they're recognized as a religion. And so I feel like eventually the organization does need to go down because I think that's the main way that the children are going to be protected, because they're, with all the lawsuits that have happened in the past couple decades due to child sex abuse, Jehovah's Witnesses have continued to drag their feet. They've continued to stall through the legal process and through all the legal wrangling. And they've just refused to release any documentation that would expose the problem that they have. So to me, it seems like the only course of action is to disintegrate the organization. And so that's kind of how I feel about it at this point, especially after watching this documentary. And so those are pretty much my thoughts after watching it. I think it is worth a watch, so please check it out. Whether you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness or you're not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, it's just interesting to see, because a lot of people who have never been a part of the organization can't necessarily relate to why a lot of former Jehovah's Witnesses are so passionate about this issue or passionate about other issues that occur because of being a part of this organization. So I hope you enjoyed some of my thoughts. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. Continue to check out some of the other Ex-JDub YouTubers in the description box. Hope everyone has a good weekend. Much love.